So our next speaker is Haehaetu Barrett, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Lifewise. And Haehaetu is a trained clinician and manager with a unique 30-year background in Maori leadership, management, clinical and quality risk management, and expertise, including strategic planning, business development, and iwi partnerships. Born and bred in Te Katoa Rotorua, she has serviced the mental health and addiction sector, sorry if I'm not pronouncing things correctly, at all levels, ensuring that the voices of people with lived experiences are upheld and that they align with the aspirational values and the teachings of her tupuna. Please welcome Haehaetu to the stage. Thank you.
Unuhia, ko te pautapu, ko te paumua, ko te pauroto, ko te pau te wharārua, hei āturagi mamao. Heke i o arata ki whara te aroa whanau ki te pō. Ko te pō nui, ko te pō roa, ko te pō matirero e taku waka a te arawa ngahue ai te parata. Heke panuku e ke tangaroa haumi e hui e, tāiki e. Ko te whakaariki, ko te whakaariki. Tukua mai ki a piri, tukua mai ki a tata. Kia eke mai ki runga i te paipai poto, ahau mai tawhiti e. Ka tira, he te whare, ti hei Māori ora. E ngā maunga whakahi, e ngā maunga whakaha. Koutou ko hara mai no tawhiti ko no tata, tēnei te tukumihi kia koutou. O tira ki ngā mana whenua, o tēnei o ngā whenua, ngā iwi take, ara, ko te Larakia pipu, tēnei te tukumihi kia koutou. Nā koutou, te mana o tēnei o ngā whenua, ko koutou, i ahu mai, i tēnei o ngā whenua, ko koutou i whakapua wai i runga i tēnei o ngā whenua, tēnei te mihi. Ko tāku, he tukumihi kia koutou, e ngā maunga whakahi, e ngā maunga whakaha, e te ti, e te tā, area mai o taringa, ki tēnei taonga kua ahu mai i te whenua o Aotearoa, tēnei a ngai Māori kua hara mai ki te tukumihi o tira, ki te kōrero kia koutou, e ngā iwi take o tira, e ngā iwi pupu o tēnei o ngā whenua, tēnei te mihi. Anei, te tumu o Lifewise, te puna toia ora o Lifewise ki Aotearoa, kua hara mai ki te kōrero kia koutou, no reira. Are mai o taringa, titiro ki ngā mahi. No reira, anei aha hetu, e mihi nei, e tau nei. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Ko ai au, ko Haehaetu Barrett tōku ingoa, te arawa te waka, nā te whakau e te iwi, nā te kāringa te hapu, te koutu te marae, ko ai te kaiwhakahaere o tēnei rōpū Lifewise Trust ki Aotearoa. Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Haehaetu Barrett, and thank you for the great pronunciation. It's always a hard one for people to pronounce before I come on the stage, so much appreciated. And as Wirihana has just acknowledged, the people of this land, the Indigenous people of this land, the whānau, the people, the iwi, the tribes of the Larakia, we acknowledge you and thank you for hosting the conference, but also visitors from afar, including us from across the ditch in Aotearoa. I just want to firstly acknowledge the organisers of the conference. For the last 9 months, we've been travelling all over the world actually, looking at the space of Indigenous leadership in this thing called the housing crisis or homelessness. And I've just returned in April back to Rotorua, New Zealand, from experiencing a conference, the International Housing First Partners Conference, around all the work that has been delivered throughout the world within this program context, but also was a keynote speaker around what we do in the Housing First space in New Zealand. But one thing that we captured in that time of being in Atlanta is the ability to not only stand and speak with conviction around who we are as Māori in New Zealand, but also to set the messaging of why we are selected to speak at conferences because of the work that we do for our people from our people, and in terms of the challenges that we have and how we can share that international exchange of information in an Indigenous space. The thing that struck me in Atlanta, Georgia, was the absolute raw, still to this day, racism against the whānau, the people, the Indigenous tribes of that land, and the inequities that they still face and the challenges that they have not only in the homelessness, but they're also topping the pops in things like mental health and addictions, the correction facilities, still overpopulating the prisons. And every country that we've delivered this same kōrero in, we are still, as the Indigenous people, the highest in that level. Today's presentation, I see I've been sent a topic, and it's around iwi connections for us, but also at an international scale. How do we partner? How do we work together in a collaborative and collective approach to end this thing called homelessness? And each time I stand at a platform, it's quite difficult for me to speak because I know that it's the people of the First Nations or the Indigenous that are overpopulating these stats. So the conversation that I'm about to have can make people very, very uncomfortable. It's known to disrupt, but it's also known to send a message, a clear message, that conferences as such like this cannot be held without us, because usually they're about us, because we're everywhere. So this is the kind of kōrero, the conversation, that I'm about to give. Who is Haehaetu Barrett? I was raised in Rotorua, New Zealand, central North Island. My father's Australian. He hails from New South Wales, Newcastle. And he actually graduated as an engineer scientist and moved, didn't move, three of them travelled from Newcastle over to Wellington, and for their celebration when they graduated at university. If you're very familiar with Māori ability to sing and entertain, Howard Morrison Quartet was playing in Wellington, and the three Australians went along to the pub and they listened. When they followed Howard Morrison and his quartet back to Rotorua, where they were from, in the village that we call Ohinemotu. My mother, a Māori maiden of Ngāti Whakaue Ohinemotu, was strolling down the riverside, and there was a big party happening within the village because the quartet were home and they brought these three Australians with them. My father was very drunk and he fell in the river at the back of the house. My mother was walking to the party, she dived in, and 58 years later he's still living in the village. My experience of being half Australian and raised by a very strong woman of her tribe, from a family in high esteem in the tribe. I walked two worlds. I was raised to have an educated life from my father, and with my mother I was raised in the knowledge of who I was as an Indigenous person, Māori, that came from the village. Those times in my childhood when I was attending schools were very challenging. My mother very dark, my father fair with blue eyes, the kids were all fair, green-eyed, and every school holidays we had to come to Australia. Every school photo I had to wear green and yellow tracksuit. It was very, very difficult when you go to an all-Māori school, let me tell you. But what I learned from that was the two worlds. In our space, that's privileged. A very privileged life. So as I came through the ranks of working with the most vulnerable communities, mental health and addictions, crime, statistics, eventually homelessness, the learnings that I learned and the stability that I gained as a young person came into play when I started leading services across New Zealand to build what we see today as the Lifewise Trust, who belongs to a collective of providers within Aotearoa that deliver services. So my message in that one, we speak about collective impact. We speak about collaborative approach. It's your individual responsibility. Whatever role that you have, within that service, from a peer support to a lived experience, from a volunteer to the admin, to the non-regulated support worker, to the care and support worker, to the team leaders, to the managers, to the chief executives. We have an individual responsibility to work within the integrity that we chose to be in a field of such high complexity. This is not the job that we all wake up and say, I want to go and work with homeless. You know, when you're setting your goals at high school and you're in the career development, I wanted to be an airline hostess. I did. I didn't think I'd end up in anything like the sector, but you would have seen me getting guided around. I'm legally blind. I know it doesn't look like it, so if you see me walking into things, that's why I'm not drunk. I'm just, walking into things. But I didn't make it as an air hostess. I didn't, of course, because you had to see and save people's lives. So I decided that I was going to go and work in the health field as an administrator, and I chose the emergency department, and I actually chose the wake shift because I had young children. In that wake shift, at the time of the 80s, the 90s, we didn't have Indigenous Māori health teams within the hospital settings. If you were Māori, you were working as a domestic. So you were one of the cleaners or you were in the kitchen, but you certainly weren't a frontline. But this white-faced green eyes made it to the front line with a strong name like Haehaetu. So they figured out quite fast, she's fair, but she can connect with the Maoris. So they put me on the hardest shift. So I got all the drunks. I got everything that comes in after midnight. And I learnt so much. And actually I learnt that in terms of engagement, that the whānau families, people that were coming in, were able to talk to me. I was able to get their names for the doctors. I was able to, what we later learned, de-escalate high-level situations because they were all related to me, all of them. They were all related to me. So I knew everyone that came in. One particular evening we had a cot death, and the family came in and she would not let this baby go. She would not let the baby go. To her, the baby was still asleep. We didn't have private rooms in those areas. I emptied out an office as fast as I could so I could support this wailing mother and talk to the doctors to just let her hold the baby for a little bit longer. Her husband was a shift worker at one of our timber mills. When he came in, and he was related to me, he said, "Hi, where's my missus? I just got a call." How do you tell one of your cousins that's come in from a shift that I'm going to take you into an office that I've made into a quick little room, that your baby has passed? How do you do that as a very young, what they'd say, emergency department receptionist? You do it because the connection to your people outweighs everything else in terms of a system. You just do it. And I did it. And I took that man in and I allowed them time to sit. There was one cleaner that was on the wake shift. She was an elderly Indigenous woman, Māori. She says to me, "You need to go and study and help our people." I was a solo mum. I wasn't supported in terms of the dads. Hear that, dads? I wasn't. But I had a father and a mother that gave me the stability to go off and study. And I did social work. Left the comfort of a job and went into a very frightening thing called the academic world. And as a solo mum going into a classroom and you're trying to be, I don't know, something to make difference, you learn ambition, you learn passion, you learn purpose. You learn that when your mother couldn't settle in Australia, when your father tried to have her live over here in Newcastle, why she took you and your siblings back to her homeland where she could raise you with her family. You understand the differences of working in an Aboriginal, Māori, Pacific Island, First Nations, Black American space. You learn it, and you learn that you have to adapt to this thing called the system that really determines the way forward for your people. So as you get educated and come through the ranks, social work, I got into youth work, started working with rangatahi young people, then I got into social work, and then I went into the big demon place where everyone tells you not to go, mental health. You don't go, no, there, no. Don't go to mental health. I went into mental health, and that's where I saw in a residential supported accommodation, small little Māori provider in Rotorua, I saw the change that love can make. When our people are put out into a provider setting and the whānau, the family, disconnect, the provider actually becomes the family. A lot of you right now will know these people. You can see them right now, and you can see when they've disconnected from their next of kin, and they heavily rely on this thing called a provider or the system. It is our integrity when you're working within that space to align connection, to align partnership. You have to work within an Indigenous space, within an academic space, being able to clinically analyse so your voice is heard for this person, and then be able to kind of think a care plan or development plan or career plan, a reintegration plan. You've got to be able to lead in that space, even if you're the peer support, even if you're the support worker. They heavily rely because you have their lives in your hand. So as I was coming up through the ranks, did my stint in youth, did my stint in mental health, I went into the other demon world, addictions, where everyone tells you, don't go into addictions, don't go in there. They do that to themselves. They want to do that. They're drug users. You hear all the judgment, discrimination. And again, as you're platforming through, the importance of having good networks, collaborative approach is good, but it's the integrity of the heart that gets you through, because that's a hard space. In New Zealand, probably early 2000s, we finally recognised that we had to put mental health and addictions together in terms of a workforce, because they were walking hand in hand. People that were suffering from mostly generational trauma were turning to drugs. They were turning to drugs to just get them through. People that were being diagnosed with schizophrenia, psychosis, dual diagnosis, we all know the terms, were usually from generational trauma. So we have to look at that in the space. When the 2014 housing issue hit us in Aotearoa, and it hit hard, all the providers, in terms of government-funded providers, including Lifewise, who I lead across Aotearoa, we really had to look at the space. Housing can work, it can. The Housing First program, you don't have to be house ready, you can go straight in. It's the support services. It is the support services and the capability of the workforce that enables the sustainability of that tenancy. But within the complexity of the sustainability of that tenancy, and especially for us as the Indigenous, we overpopulate. We overpopulate. We actually dominate those stats. So as services are trying to build to meet the need, so is the heightening of the access. So we have to look at what is happening in the root causes. What is happening in our root causes? Mental health and addictions rampant throughout the communities. Not shy, doesn't have any stigma to who it takes hold of. Circumstance prevails. Any one of us today can be homeless tomorrow. It doesn't have a set group. Circumstance prevails. But what the public eye sees, and it sees it quite well through media, is us as the Indigenous. It is our roles and responsibility to work together to ensure that when we are building these services across a collective approach, or as we are examining partnerships to end homelessness, that all the factors that I've just described, from a young youth worker, from a young emergency department receptionist, from the skills that we hold and the integrity of the mana of who our tupuna are, we can get through. Now I'm fast forwarding this, I normally get longer when I present, but I'm trying to fast forward this to just give a glimpse of where we're sitting. Emergency motels, transitional housing, all of that came into play. Hit Rotorua, where we're from, Central North Island, that if you have been to Rotorua, it's the tourism icon of the Central North Island. It's all the geysers, thermal. We've got a strip there of motels called Fenton Street. 6 years ago, that strip of motels, particularly after COVID, was overtaken with these people that they call homeless. People that they were calling homeless were placed in these motels. The motels eventually became the feeding fields for the gangs. The gangs knew where everyone were. They went in and they sold the drugs. Actually, they moved in there. They moved themselves in there. They had a whole network of immediate customers. When you're looking at solutions, you need to look at the reality of the space as the government. Did they help us or did they set us up? Did they help us or did they set us up? Lifewise became involved with one of these motels. The chief executive is from Rotorua, went down from Auckland City to participate in the opening of this motel. Walked in, there was a huge incident, gangs, everything, you name it. The chief executive shut the motel down that day. Went down to local government, asked how the hell did these motels get consent? Could see the condition of the motel, and you start thinking it's more cleaner for our people to be in the parks than the conditions that they were put in these motels. Hear that again. In the conditions that they were put in these motels. Just put them in there, put them in there. That's how it became. When that disruption happened and the government didn't know anything, they say, around this motel, because it had been closed down, they had to come in and look at the conditions that they put the most vulnerable communities in, the most vulnerable complexities that we know were placed together without tight support services. It was a den waiting to explode. So when I closed that down and disrupted the whole of, you can't do that, it's emergency housing, where are they going to go? And put in people that could connect, that could do triage, that could assess the need, that could connect. I put in elders. I put in peer supports. I put in people from the community who knew how to look after and love one another. 43 people were in that motel. We reduced it down to 6 and we housed them in Housing First. 6 of them walked home. Hear that again. 6 of them walked home. They weren't homeless. It's because they knew the environment that had been set up and placed in a place where everyone can go. The message in that one, do not determine political advantage or policy without us, because we know our communities. We know the people in our communities. We know who to involve in our communities. We know who we are in terms of solutions, and let us be focused in that area. This haerenga means trip. We travelled with a collective. Wirihana and I come from Tarawa, which is our tribe in Rotorua, and I've travelled also with my whānau from Auckland, a collective of agencies that come together not just to plan services, that come together not just to do training and development, that come together to survive, that come together to be together. We need each other. We need each other to face ending homelessness. We need each other to come together in forums like this to knowledge exchange. We need each other. So when we face those whānau, clients, whatever we want to call them, that we are so robust that they can see a united front of support, not a setup. There's a clear difference in there. The Auckland Housing Collective, the Central City, we're out in the suburbs as well. Right now in Auckland City, on one of our main roads, Karangahape Road, we've got a cafe there. In 2014, I closed down the soup kitchens. Closed them. I just close things. People say, how did you close it? And I go, I shut the door. I just close it down. If it's not safe, it's my individual responsibility that I made pledge to when I came into the sector. That I came into the sector to care and nurture people. So I closed that one down because I was sick of watching people lining up in the middle of Auckland City, go and get the soup. So that was the morning one. Same group lining up in the evening, go and get the soup, and then the next day. And then the next day. What change was happening? What change was happening for those people? Nothing. What discrimination from the public was happening? Oh, there they are. One's in the soup kitchen. Look at them. Addicts. Da, 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 da. Everything like that. So the judgment just heightened. So just closed it. Then we made a real crazy idea up. Real crazy one. Let's open a cafe. Just for street people. Just for the homeless. You can't do that. Why can't we do that? Who's going to fund that? We'll find people. We'll find people. So we opened that cafe. 2015 it opened. Very strong today on Karangahape Road. Workforce is the street people. Led by the street people. Opens at 5:30 every morning for the working girls because they got to eat too. Nobody gets discriminated against. Nobody. Open every weekend for the users so they're safely using in a safe environment. And then back in the week, good kai, food, affordable prices because they pay like anyone else. $2, $2.50, but they're paying. They're getting some sense of value. Don't get me wrong, the most highest incident reports come from that service for me. They do. I've got 3 this morning. You know, they do. You know, that every time, here they are, he's merged. That's what they're called, merge. Here they are, here they are. But when I spoke to the leadership team, which are all our whānau family who come from the streets, I asked them, what do you want me to say at this conference? Because who am I to speak at a conference without speaking to them first? Who am I to do that? What do you want me to say at this conference? Just one thing. Believe in us. Believe in us. Just help us to do what we know what we can do for others like us. You see, we become the infrastructure. We become the support to navigate their pipeline. We get too caught up in the contracts. We get so caught up in the contracts and the political environment around us that the ones from the streets don't even know what's going on because they're just trying to survive. So when we house them, and we do, it's like a pipeline from their closed kitchen, from their closed motel, from the closed wall of you can't do it to actually I can, with good support in place, a workforce that is capable, a workforce that is nurtured, and a leadership team and a leader that isn't afraid to get out there across the globe and take the courage and speak their voice. So when I was invited to speak at this conference, I thought, oh, have they seen me speak? I'm very different to others. I don't have notes. I never have notes. They really confuse, they do. They confuse me. Plus I'm blind, I can never see them. So I never have notes. But what I do have is young succession, like Weteriana, coming through, that allows me safely to speak when he did that karakia prayer, to help me come on stage. What I do have is colleagues like Rami, as colleagues like Fiona, as colleagues like Ilana, who represent our collective to where we come from. And what I do have is an international exchange group, because I know, you bet your ass, you're going to Google me tonight, because you're going to either like me or you're going to hate me. But you're going to find out, how the hell does she talk like that? That's an international exchange group. And I've really enjoyed listening to all the different ways of working within the space. But last night I was more taken at the networking dinner from the elder that opened for us from this land. And he spoke around how his mother was taken into slavery. And he spoke around how 4 of them were taken away as guinea pigs, but he also spoke of their success. Through all that trauma, he spoke resilience, and he spoke about this land, and he welcomed us to this land in representation of his ancestors. I took that and I said to Weteriana last night, I think he just stole my speech, that fella, that's all right. But what I said is the connection that we have intrinsically in the spiritual realm, Māori, non-Māori, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, you didn't just wake up and say, I'm going to go and work in the hardest field ever. You didn't. You didn't just say every time when we have challenges with our workforce, our staff, political environment, you didn't just wake up every day and say, as you mainly you might do, why do I do this work? Why do I do this work? You do this work as our individual responsibility to a collective impact as holds our integrity. It does. And one recovery story, one peer support that's appointed into workforce, one sustainable housing from the streets to emergency housing to transitional to housing first. Just one of those stories makes the difference. That an impact of collectiveness and an approach of working in partnership to end homelessness is real. We just got to put our voices together and tell the government officials, federal, which I learnt over in the States, political environments, MPs that understand the space, not just come and read reports, that actually get in there with us and know it. That's the collective impact that we're after. So they said to me, this is a good joke, we'll wave at you when you've got 10 minutes. Well, sister, I can't see you. So please, did they wave?
I was trying to tell you.
Oh, what he's been trying to tell me. Okay. So without further ado, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. We're heading back to Aotearoa tonight on the worst flight ever, 1 o'clock in the morning. Never heard of anything like that. Yeah. So we're doing that tonight. But what I would like, my leaving message is please stay connected. Let's work together. It's a big space, it's a big mahi, but most of all, be kind to ourselves and look after each other. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Oh, thank you, Nala. Just before we close things, I'll just quickly share what I did early on before I gave it to Hai, just so everybody's understand what went on. So part of our culture is that we must clear the pathway before people. So as Māori, only male speak in forums like this, where we come from. But in order for a female to be placed on this forum, we have to clean the pathway for her, because she is known, or they are known, our wahine, our ladies are known as tapu, sacred, because they are the bearers of our generation to come. And so it's very important that we as males, Māori males, is to take the impact spiritually. So that was my role this morning, and in order to finish her beautiful speech, we are going to share a song in our language, and it talks about a dream. This dream here talks about what we call a taonga. It was my uncle who first placed his eyes on his grandchild, and he speaks about how the most majestic, beautiful being that he's ever seen in his life. Okay, and it goes like this. Tira, tira ki taku tau, kei hara ke ha, kei runga ke, kei raro ke, kei roto i taku moe moe a. Tira, tira ki taku tau, kei hara ke ha, kei runga ke, kei raro ke, kei roto i taku moe moe a. unuhia tau tapu nui a tāne kia wāte kia māma te ngāko te tinana te wairua i tera takatsu e rongo whakairia ki runga kia wātea tuturu a whiti whakamaua kia tīna. Haumi e hui e, tā e ki e, kia ora.